Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SpaceWeek Live, episode 126 on this Sunday, January 31st, 2022. As always, this is a live Q&A session, so if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and make sure to tag my name, rawspace, or @rawspace, so that we're sure to see them. Actually, make sure to put the @ sign, or the script won't pick it up. Okay, so this might be a little bit short and sweet because there were very few launches last week, but we do have some stuff to talk about, and there's a lot coming up this week, so let's get to it. Let's see. Last week, on Wednesday, a Chinese Lijian 1 rocket was launched for the first time from Jiuquan in the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert. I always get that wrong. It's a 4-stage solid-propelled vehicle designed by the Institute of Mechanics of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. On board were 6 satellites. See, we've got some multiple angles here. That's always nice. I like this wide shot. That is a stark landscape. Then, on Friday, a Long March 2D launched 3 Yaogan 35 satellites from Xichang in southwest China. So those were actually the only launches last week. But in other news, and pretty significant news if you follow this sort of thing, as you may recall, last week, so the week before last, China had launched their Wentian science module to their space station, the Chinese space station, Tiangong. Well, that was a single stage to orbit launch of a very beefy Long March 5B booster, one of China's biggest rockets, with four side boosters. Now, the side boosters split off in a sort of Korolev cross sort of way, but the core booster followed the payload all the way to orbit. Now, normally, first stages they fall away a couple of minutes after launch, the first stages of rockets being the largest, in order to get the initial velocity and push the rest of the rocket up through the thick parts of Earth's atmosphere. But in this case, it was a single stage to orbit, and so the large 23-ton approximately first stage ended up in orbit around the Earth. Well, as has happened in all previous launches of the Long March 5 and its variants, the booster, what goes up must come down, and it came down in the vicinity of Malaysia. So we're looking at Southeast Asia. You see there Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Indonesia, Jakarta. And so the hubbub, the reason why the space community is bent out of shape about this is because when you bring a large object down out of space, you're supposed to do so in a controlled manner, because otherwise it could fall on a populated area. Now, most of the world is covered in ocean, and much of the land is although it may be developed, most of the land doesn't actually have people on it. So the chances of anyone actually being killed or injured by falling space debris is vanishingly small. However, the risk still exists, and therefore it is expected that spacefaring nations and entities will take the steps needed to ensure that that risk is brought down to as low a level as possible, which is why we have Point Nemo in the Pacific, which is where satellites and spacecraft and rocket stages and whatnot are targeted for when they are deorbited. But for whatever reason, China did not build in a controlled deorbit capability with the Long March 5. And so for each of the previous launches, the first stage booster came down, one time it came down in the Indian Ocean to the southwest of India, near the Maldives, and another time it came down in, I don't remember, some other Southeast Asian area, and actually caused some property damage but didn't actually hurt anyone. In this case, it came down in the vicinity of Malaysia, and it was reported that some people in Sarawak, which is in the eastern island, in the eastern part here on the island of Borneo, reported seeing debris from the rocket come down. And so the thing is, whoopsie, little lag. The thing is, who's going to, slap China on the wrist for doing this? I mean, there's no, they can NASA's administrator can issue all the rhetoric he wants, but and the international spacefaring community can complain all they want, but China's going to do what China's going to do, and there's really nothing anybody can do about it. Now, we see some majorly populated areas in the region where this rocket came down, and the booster, I should say, and it can leave a trail of debris stretching for 1,000 miles. I mean, because it does break up, but because it's so large, not all of it gets, burned up in the atmosphere. And so you could have debris stretching across a vast path on the ground. And we see here majorly populated areas such as Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Jakarta, Indonesia. It's, I don't even know how many millions of people. It's like 20 million people or something live there. It's a huge city. So, shame on whoever made the decision to not, incorporate a controlled deorbit capability into this rocket. I mean, it's a capable rocket for sure, but the lack of consideration of safety, and the potential for random destruction is unconscionable for sure. Now here is a short clip which I believe to be, I don't think there's any audio to speak of, but which I believe to be the Long March 5B booster breaking up. I'm not sure where this is over. But it's a very short clip. And that's all I've seen. There's another clip floating around out there, which is, if you're familiar with the appearance of orbital debris, or rather of deorbiting objects, is an obvious fabrication, and so I'm not going to show that one. But and shame on people who either take clips from movies or manufacture fake footage to try to trick people. But in any case, yeah. So yet another Chinese boot. I would bet you that when the what is it, the Shunqian module launches either later this year or next year, that it too, the booster will come down in an uncontrolled manner. So we have to be smarter than this as a spacefaring species. But hopefully in the future I don't know, maybe if there is an incident as tragic as that might be, perhaps that will motivate them to make some changes in order, at the very least, to avoid the proverbial egg on their face in the eyes of the international community. Because they want to project, like all spacefaring nations want to project, a sense of capability, competence, and pride, not wanton uncaring about the value of human life and whatever. But in any case, taking a look further back into the annals of space history, we are currently in the midst of the 51st anniversary of the Apollo 15 mission with astronauts David Scott, Alfred Worden, and James Irwin. They landed on Monday, July 30th, ascended back off of the lunar surface on August 2nd, then returned back to Earth on August 7th, 1971. This Saturday will mark the 10th anniversary of the landing of the Curiosity rover on Mars, back on August 6th, 2012. Designed for a 2-year mission, it continues to explore the Martian surface today, chugging right along. Looking ahead to this week, on Tuesday, August 2nd, at 1 a.m. Eastern, 0500 UTC, Rocket Lab will launch an Electron rocket with the second in a pair of missions for the National Reconnaissance Office called Antipodean Adventure. It was originally planned to launch within 10 days of the previous launch on July 13th, but it was delayed an additional 10 days for reasons unspecified. Now, Thursday, August 4th is shaping up to be a very busy one. First, at 6:29 a.m. Eastern, 10:29 UTC, a ULA Atlas V will launch from Cape Canaveral with SBIRS GEO-06, a geostationary missile early warning satellite for the U.S. Space Force. That same day at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 13:30 UTC, a Blue Origin New Shepard suborbital rocket will launch 6 more paying customers past the Kármán line to about 104 kilometers in altitude. On board will be the first Egyptian and the first Portuguese spacefarers, as well as the founder of Dude Perfect. So, silly antics can buy you a trip to space, apparently. Also on Thursday, August 4th at 7:08 p.m. 7:08 p.m. Let's see, let me start again. Also on Thursday, August 4th at 7:08 p.m. Eastern, 23:08 UTC, a SpaceX Falcon 9 will launch the Korean Pathfinder Lunar Orbiter, or KPLO, also called Donuri, from Cape Canaveral. South Korea's first space exploration mission will study the moon and some of its permanently shadowed craters with 6 instruments. The Lunar Terrain Imager will take images of potential landing sites for Korea's upcoming lunar lander mission. The Wide-Angle Polarimetric Camera, or POLCAM, will image the entire lunar surface, except for the poles, to further study the characteristics of the lunar regolith, which is the lunar soil, basically, pulverized by eons of impacts. The KPLO magnetometer, or KMAG, will measure the magnetic properties of the lunar environment. Now, the moon doesn't have a magnetosphere like Earth, but there are localized magnetic fields which could affect spacecraft, as well as the solar wind. The KPLO gamma ray spectrometer, or KGERS, will investigate and map the chemical composition of lunar surface materials within the high-frequency gamma ray energy range. The Delay-Tolerant Networking Experiment, or DTNPL, I'm not sure where the P comes from, but the DTNPL will test internet connectivity at interplanetary distances. Sort of interplanetary. There's a couple seconds of delay from here of light lag between here and the moon, and accounting for lag is one of the great challenges of network connectivity. And doing so at distances of, let's say, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of miles is a real challenge. NASA's ShadowCam will map reflectance within the permanently shadowed regions of polar craters to search for evidence of water ice deposits. ShadowCam is based on the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter's LROC camera, but is 800 times more sensitive. Now, KPLO is just the first phase of a 2-phase Korean lunar exploration program. Phase 2 will involve a lunar orbiter, lander, and rover to be launched on a KSLV-2 rocket from the Naro Space Center in 2025. Possibly also on Thursday, at a time to be determined, is the demonstration launch of an Indian Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, or SSLV, to go along with their Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, PSLV, and their GSLV, or Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle. This launch has been delayed multiple times over a period of almost 3 years, though, so stay tuned for additional potential schedule changes. So I want to take a moment, as usual, to thank my supporters and those who have contributed to the channel. Your stalwart and steadfast support is greatly appreciated. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are Patreon, merch store, and PayPal options. So let's see. Let me get to your questions. Do we have anything today? All right. Mark Desire says, Raw Space, I wonder if or when the number of Chinese launches is going to surpass all other launches. I believe they have in some years. China's a fairly prolific launcher of spacecraft. And some years I think that China has had the most. I'm not sure. Well, I know that they have in some years surpassed other individual launch providers, but I'm not sure if they've ever surpassed everyone else combined. Especially in this day of SpaceX, though, that is very unlikely because SpaceX conducts an awful lot of launches, way more than anybody else, except perhaps for China. Let's see. MVM Motovlog Music says, regarding the out-of-control boosters, unfortunately it seems that there will have to be casualties before anything is done. And I would say, realistically, I mean, so in the Western world, often the way things go is when someone dies, that's when the needle moves. But oftentimes that's not even sufficient. Like, you know, if somebody were to be beamed in the head by a piece of a Long March 5 rocket and, you know, taken out, there would be a media frenzy. But you know what? The Chinese leadership, they don't care. They're like, you know, we're still going to buy their products. We're still going to feed trillions of dollars into their, you know, into their economy. I mean, there's really nothing that the world can do to China that would sting enough for them to actually care. And so, I mean, that may be a little bleak an outlook, but you know, now that with that said, they aren't completely tone deaf to the notion of safety. I mean, they have taken steps to, like, for example, putting parachutes on first stage boosters in order to, like parachutes that have a capability of a sort of a rudimentary capability of steering, so that they can bring them down more or less safely in unpopulated areas, as opposed to just letting them fall, you know, across the landscape willy-nilly. You know, but yeah, by and large, China does not have a great track record of safety considerations and regard for human life. But one can hope, especially if you live in the path, the orbital path of their launches. Tig asks, Raw Space, any news on Artemis? I don't have any specific news on Artemis. I mean, they had their mostly successful wet dress rehearsal a few weeks ago, but I don't have any specific news. I believe the launch is still on for later this year, but I don't like to you know, to latch onto specific dates until it's much closer to, because they often change. But all right, anything else? Adrian the Magician says, Raw, any update on the explosion at SpaceX? Yeah, so there are so many other channels that are covering SpaceX development, like Starship development, with a magnifying glass, that and the official information is so sparse, and so mostly what we know is either from assorted responses to tweets by Elon Musk, or from eyewitness video from the various entities such as Lab Padre, our partner channel, that are physically looking at the launch site and the goings on there. I don't like to. Well, first of all, I don't like to speculate, but also I simply don't have the time to follow all these independent sources of information about the latest either drama or interesting things from the SpaceX development camp. So unfortunately, sometimes I'm a little light on details of the SpaceX stuff. But I couldn't possibly hope to compete with the likes of of Lab and NASA Spaceflight and Felix and SpaceX Centric and all those other channels that focus very intently on this stuff. But I just cross my fingers and hope that they succeed. But if they do have any launches that are broadcast, then I will certainly, of course, bring those to you here. All right. Thunderfoot. I haven't watched Thunderfoot in so many years. I mean, I know he's quite a lightning rod, but yeah, I have. I used to be familiar with his stuff a long, long time ago, but I wasn't aware that he was providing any commentary on SpaceX and Starlink. All right. So it looks like that will looks like that'll do it for this week. Thank you so much for coming. Remember that there is a podcast version of this show, so if you're interested to either listen in the car or whatever at your leisure, feel free to. I'm going to put the links in the podcast. What is it? libsyn.com/ spaceweek.libsyn.com. That's spaceweek.libsyn.com, or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, etc. In any case, thank you so much for coming. Keep it raw, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. If I can figure out how to fade this thing. Here we go.